G'day there, it's Dave here, Dave Mills, and with another exciting video on the development momentum theory of chess, or the DMT. I want to just talk to you about balanced forces versus, imbalances in your position, and how that actually has greatly affected how people think about the game. In fact, if you want to learn more about imbalances in a position, the masterclass on that by all means is Silman, and he talks about imbalances in material, space, and so on. And creating imbalances and so on, and playing where you have imbalances. So it was a wonderful development in the theory of chess. I would say it was this big improvement into the theory of chess as Nimzovich's contribution with the hypermodern school. You would say, whoa, wait a minute. But I think it very much helps people to look at the board, and to, if you've never actually played chess before, even if you start with a Silman method, I don't think you would be doing anything wrong. Personally, there's a few others that I think might be better actual teachers of the game. Like, for example, Pandolfini, I think, is one of the great chess teachers of the modern era, and has contributed a lot to has a massive body of work on chess, and Silman is I think he works very hard to be extra clear, and in the modern editions of his works, I definitely think a worthy investment if chess is your jam. Now, the DMT is something that I definitely one of the things that really stood out for me is I had a great amateur love of physics, and not so much the maths of physics. Didn't have much love for that, but I definitely had a lot of love for the concept space. Let's just call it the conceptual space of physics, and how it looks at systems of things, and energy and forces, and laws of the universe. And I realized that there's a certain amount of similarities, potential and kinetic energy between the pieces. Like, I realized there's a certain degree of similarities, and so it wasn't later until I was coaching chess that I actually started tinkering and thinking about this, and writing in my secret diary just my thoughts about this. And so what does it mean by balanced forces? Well, in physics and in life, when the forces are equal and opposite and balanced, there's actually no force. Remember, force is the push and pull between the pieces, and when it's equal and opposite, there's actually a situation of tension and a balancing. The net force is zero, and actually maintaining a net force of zero, building the tension, and it's often the one who breaks that tension who actually gets a disadvantage. All right, whereas there's obvious examples of the opposite. We see this position here, and just from a basic positional sense, why has the pawn center? Why has this mobile center maps of pawns? And that is an advantage, clear advantage. And we see black has a misalignment between the bishop and the knight. The fact is that pawn to e5 is devastating, and white's crushing it. But what's black's advantage? We know black's at the bottom, so it's black to move. What's black's advantage? Black's advantage here is tempo. It's black to move. The pawn has, the white has these devastating looking bishops pointing at the king's side. Black's wondering if it should hide in the center, but at this stage here, Black hasn't finished the opening phase. The heavies aren't connected, but we see in this situation where Black has a bit of space on the queen's side for the massive pawn monster that is coming down upon the center. Also, White is very happy because it has a centralized heavy and is very, very happy with that knight, even at a4, because it's definitely controlling a few important squares, dark squares there, and the position is looking. White's thinking to himself, "Hey, this is great," but in this position, Black to play and win some material. Do you see it? Well, firstly, we understand that the queen and bishop have overwhelming momentum on h2, right? The queen and bishop, the bishop's worth 3.5, the queen's worth 9. That's 12.5, and the momentum, the forces are not equal and opposite on h2. Obviously, the king is a very weak defender, and obviously the knight is pretty weak there. And but here's the thing: the queen at h5 is the queen at. Here's a weakness in White's position. White has a significant weakness. That isn't just the fact that h2 is vulnerable potentially because of the king, but it's actually also the loose queen. It's a minor cog. So remember, it's the 5 rings of remember the king's safety, loose pieces or semi-loose pieces, misaligned pieces, all right, barrages and batteries. Okay, in this case, that knight is it really defending? A pin piece cannot attack or defend. If it's an absolute pin against the king, it's certainly not, but it's rarely can that pin piece ever move. So if bishop takes h2 just from a thing, and knight recovers, the knight's not really defending h2. Obviously the queen will lop off the queen at e2. So even worse is if the king runs after bishop h2 to h1. Obviously that would be creating a battery, and then the bishop could play to f4 and check. It's looking very, very ugly. And so after bishop check and the king moves, all right, the knight is still not able to. The knight is now able to move, I should say. And but obviously that dark square bishop is going to move, perhaps to even consider. It has to consider c7, or it maybe even not bishop to b8 of all places, because obviously you don't want to step back after winning a pawn, and obviously your queen is looking at coming into h1, deactivating that knight, putting the knight back on his home square, and so on. So there's all sorts of ideas here. Black has won a pawn, and the game is not over yet. Okay, the game is not over yet, and so it's a very, very important thing to consider. And just because you win a pawn doesn't mean the game is over, but it's definitely a huge advantage. So what do I want to talk to you about is we know the difference between contact forces and non-contact forces. The forces to do with the space, interactions between squares, and obviously there's also contact forces. So if you actually understand and you actually are starting to get a sense of this, I'm very, very grateful. Please leave, your comments, your thoughts, and just understand, just by thinking about where are the centers of gravity, loose pieces. Obviously you want to think about minor and major centers of gravity. And so just think about that. And it's important to realize that white in this position here didn't actually have a sense of danger. What actually happened and didn't actually build momentum like perhaps should have. Okay, and so yes, that pawn center is a bit of a beast, and yes, that moving that pawn to e4 was a good step. White itself hasn't completed development, and so the threat of pawn to e5 is looming, and having that pawn center is definite advantage. But that loose queen, not appreciating the situation is actually a big deal. And obviously maybe queen to d3 instead of pawn to e4. Queen to d3 may have been the right choice, and that way there's no breaking a pin. When you see a pin, break a pin, because they're actually accelerating their position. You want to really understand that when the retardation is them accelerating their position in a real meaningful way. Just remember the car analogy. When the car is not moving, it's not even if the speed is constant, doesn't mean you're accelerating. All right, the moment you hit the brakes, you are actually accelerating, believe it or not, because it's a change of velocity. You're changing, velocity is the tempo, and you're changing the direction, and direction is like, threats, checks, and captures, and so on. So forcing moves, as they say in chess, forcing moves. And a good way of thinking about it, force is the push and pull the pieces. So please forgive me for reiterating. It's just, I just want you to understand what the conceptual space of the DMT, the development momentum theory of chess. I've actually practiced saying it quickly, because when I did my first videos on it, I would get to that and I'd be like, how do I say that quickly? And so abbreviating it made perfect sense. And just in the next video, we'll definitely touch on value matchups versus numbers matchups, incoming pieces versus outgoing pieces, and we'll talk about development, so we're going to talk about imbalanced forces. This video we spoke about balanced forces and how the net force is actually 0, and when there's equal and opposite pieces and forces, and it's only when a new force happens that the position actually changes, if you want to think about it like that. Okay, so there you go. All right, take care everyone. Bye.